Flynn from Lowell Celebrates Kerouac. A lot of you have been at a lot of our Lowell Celebrates Kerouac events over the weekend. Some of you may have just come out for the screening. We partnered with the Little Theater on this event. It's Magic Trip, a phenomenal documentary. But I'm not going to introduce the film. I'm here to introduce the guy who's going to introduce the film. He is the author of what I like to call the Beat Trilogy, The Hitchhiker's Guide to Jack Kerouac, the centerpiece, How the Beats Begat the Pranksters, and the final one, On the Road with Cassady's and Further Visions. He's a phenomenal dude. He comes to Lowell Celebrates Kerouac, been coming up to Lowell Celebrates Kerouac for years, and he is a lifetime beat laureate as well. I'm talking about the guy standing in the rainbow tie-dye in the middle of the room, Mr. Brian Hassett, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, man.
Yeah, we're still setting the tech up. Okay, hey. So, I just want to do a couple of thank yous real quick to Mike Flynn, who we were just talking. He came up with the idea to do a prankster film this year. It's the 60th anniversary of the original bus trip. And, so that's a great idea. And I also love that LCK is open-minded enough to understand and grasp that, you know, that Kerouac and the beats contain multitudes. And it's not just, you know, the books, and it's not just the beats from the 40s and 50s, that it continues through all of these different genres and people and artists. And so that's important, and LCK gets that, and that's a big thing. And I also want to thank all my tech people. Julian over there, the young guy in the front row, made all the tech up. Theoretically, these guys are getting something going. Oh, is this mic work? Should be using this thing. Speaking of that,
Brian, how do you flip the camera? It's the.
Oh, then just turn the machine around. Yeah, that might do it.
This machine kills fascists.
Woody Guthrie lives. Okay, so this film is from the pranksters in 1964 when they did the trip, filmed it. And, but something I'll get into later, but they couldn't hook up the video to the audio. That wasn't invented yet. And, or some people were just doing it at that time, and they are living examples of why it needed to be done. 16 mil could not be connected to an audio, so you could film something, or you could audio tape it, but you couldn't do both. And the footage mostly sat unused until Kesey and Babbs finally, in the 90s, 30-something years later, were able to concoct and create a two-part version of this thing that they sort of sold as home movies. And then in 2011, anyway, is when the movie that you're going to see came out. Finally, a major Hollywood director, Alex Gibney, who actually won an Oscar for Best Feature Documentary for Taxi to the Dark Side. Was also nominated for the Enron Smartest People in the Room documentary. So, a major Hollywood director had to take this on. And it took 6 years to get the footage restored from actually Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation largely funded it and paid film restoration experts at UCLA to restore the film. It was just so, you know, badly treated, let's say, over the many decades. And even the perforations on the side of the film were, in some cases, destroyed. So it was a 6-year restoration project. And then Alex Gibney, great director, he also did Gonzo, by the way, the official Hunter Thompson biography. And, you know, so sort of what Jack and the Beats were to the 50s, Kesey and the Pranksters were to the 60s, and Hunter sort of was to the 70s. So this guy's really got his intention and sensibilities in the right place. And filmmakers, great filmmakers, almost always have one particular editor that they work with. Scorsese and Thelma Schumacher, Tarantino and Sally Menke, and they work as a sort of a team, a Lennon and McCartney, that they've each got different strengths, and they kind of know how the other one thinks in a way. And same case with this Alex Gibney, and his editor all along was this Alison Ellwood, and he kind of gave her point position on this one. I think it might have been her first, major feature directorial, gig. They call themselves co-directors, but she was kind of the lead. And it's interesting because the greatest beat documentary is called The Source, and that was also made by an editor. So the two great documentaries of these two eras were actually created by editors. So be hip to that when you're watching it. The editing is absolutely spectacular. Not only how they edit the '64 footage, but it's storytelling, man. And so there's going to be like an intro-y thing with Kesey's background and stuff, and how they intersperse historical footage with the '64 stuff. The actual editing is, just watch for that all throughout the film. It's absolutely masterful. So that's one thing there. And so Mike wants me to do 15 minutes, so let's see how I can pull this off. You're going to see more moving Neal Cassady than you've ever seen in your life. So that's worth the price of admission alone. When the Keseys made there's a Forrest Gump feather floating around here. When the Keseys made it, Kesey and Babbs at Intrepid Trips, and Simon Babbs, shout out Simon. Where was I going with the? They made this two-part thing, and unfortunately they a small business and they stopped making them. But if you can find them, one is called North to Manhattan. It's an hour long, and it's an hour of just the trip to Manhattan. So there's even more Neal footage in that. And if you can find it, but they've stopped making it. Another thing is, I first met Kesey at the '82 Boulder on the Road conference, and Kerouac meant the world to him. He was like Ken Kesey's hero, and and the filmmakers understand that, and you're gonna see that throughout the film a few different times, including, fun tip for your eagle-eyed viewers, when they get to the Sometimes a Great Notion book. I think, and maybe a scholar here can correct me, but I think the only time Kerouac ever wrote a blurb for a book for another author, he wrote for Ken Kesey. And you can see it when they pan the back cover of Sometimes a Great Notion. Little quote says, "This guy Ken Kesey is really very good." It's a great new American novelist. And the funny thing was, they went to New York to, ostensibly, so this whole trip was, well, maybe I'll tell you in a sec, but they went to New York in part to do press for Sometimes a Great Notion, which had just come out. And I don't think they did any. Like, there's no interviews or press conferences or TV appearances or anything, which is so prankster. So you're going to see in this movie George Walker, who I performed at LCK with in 2017. We did a Jack and Neal show. And we're going to hopefully be talking to him, the spirits and internet's willing, after the movie. So, and you can ask him questions. I'll be sitting here, I got some questions for him, but yell them out and we'll ask him. And so get hip to who he was as early as you can in the film. They'll introduce him as George Walker. He's like Paul Newman handsome. Really good looking guy, like 24 years old in this. And he's in almost every freaking scene of the movie. So it's just kind of funny and wild. Oh, and his prankster name was hardly visible, but the guy's like heavily visible. He's in the whole thing. He's highly visible. So, oh, and he was also the only mechanic on the bus, which is comical. People often, somehow, I don't know if Jack sort of put out this myth that Neal Cassady was great with cars. He might have been good driving them, but he couldn't fix anything. And there's a funny story about, like, when they lived on Bancroft in San Jose, he would keep getting these junker cars and bring them back to their property there on this suburban residential street with this thing that he was going to fix them. And he couldn't fix anything. And by the time, you know, eventually there was like a dozen wrecks sitting in their suburban yard. And, you know, they had to get the town to come and say, you got to get these things out of here. But Neal couldn't fix anything, but George could. And there's a great scene very early in the film. You're going to see this guy seeming like climbing into the engine of the bus, and that's George. You may, you know, there was this, Kesey's line was, you know, you're either on the bus or off the bus. And Kesey said of George, you're either on the bus or under the bus. So he was the only mechanic and he kept getting things. Oh, and then one other thing about getting things done. Oh, we're never going to make it here. So I'll skip all of that. So yeah, I did the 30 hours, all of that. Oh, Imaginary Forces is the graphic company the filmmakers hired to do graphics for the movie, and they're absolutely spectacular. And you're going to see them like in the opening graphics, when they have a tape of Kesey's acid test at Menlo Park. There's another time when they're all on acid when they get stuck in the mud at Wickiup. All of these things, incredibly great psychedelic visuals in this movie. And it's inspired by, the artwork is inspired by Kesey's book, The Jail Journal. And all of I can't, I've only got two hands, but this is all full of Kesey's artwork. And they used, where is it? There's some. They used this artwork that Kesey drew to inspire, and it's just a direct usage of Kesey's lettering and stuff like that you're going to see throughout. And also, there's a great little effect where when they go to a new town, like there's a crumpled piece of paper that unfolds into a postcard of the town they're going to. Great little effect. And all of these things were done by this, what were they called? Imaginary Forces, who also did, by the way, the Paris Olympics just now, and the Emmys, and Dune, Mission Impossible, all the Transformers movies, Mad Men, Boardwalk Empire. So this major graphics company, they got to do this. Also, there's a lot of voiceover in this, because there was very little audio to matching the video. And a number of them, four of the voices they have voice actors do it, because John Teton did an extensive interview with all of them in 74ish, and one of the tapes got lost. One of the people had laryngitis, so you could barely understand it, and two of the others were just so bad. So they got these voice actors to do the thing, which is actually what Ethan Hawke just had to do for the Paul Newman documentary, because Newman destroyed all of the film for his own documentary, and but they were transcriptions, and he got all these famous actors to read the parts, and that's what they've done here. So it works. But all the other voices, Kesey's, Cassady's, Babbs, George Walker, all of that is real. And you're going to see Larry McMurtry about 50 minutes in, when they get to Houston. And he was in Kesey's writing class at Stanford. And this was right at the time he was writing The Last Picture Show. So McMurtry went on to have a hell of a writing career. And they stop and visit him, and it's pretty funny. And just one other little, for the eagle-eyed viewers out there, when they get to New York for the premiere of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest on Broadway, it's Kirk Douglas is the McMurtry, and Gene Wilder was in the Broadway premiere of that, playing Billy Bibbit, if you remember him from the book of the movie. Oh, and the Dead appeared, and it's just another example, like, the first time they showed Jerry Garcia and sort of introduced him, there's George Walker right beside him. So the guy is in this whole movie. At one point they cut to, and then the acid test happened and they were crazy. And the one shot they have is George dancing like a maniac. So it's kind of funny. And also when they get, this is very cool to me, when they get to the acid test, of course, the Dead were the Warlocks, right? Until November 65. And so the first times that they were doing acid tests and hanging with Kesey, they were actually the Warlocks. And these guys, Gibney and Ellwood, were so dedicated. The audio you hear is actual Warlocks. It's pre-Grateful Dead songs that you'll hear in the thing. And then you also get a nice Morning Dew and Broke Down Palace and Truckin' and stuff. But the Dead were very generous in their assistance with the guys doing this. Okay, and then the last point is this was the birth of documentary filmmaking as we know it. When this happened, it's 1964, you couldn't sync up a 16 millimeter camera handheld to walk around and make a documentary with audio. And there was a few pioneers who were doing that at that time. Like if you think of Robert Frank's Pull My Daisy, that was all shot silent. And all the audio in that is done in a recording studio afterwards, right? And so it was like Robert Drew, Albert and David Maisel, and D.A. Pennebaker, who made Don't Look Back, filmed in '65. And so these guys invented, they figured out ways, they took cameras and figured out a way to hook up a reel-to-reel recorder to the actual camera. And that's how they were able to make, and there's a great picture of Pennebaker filming Dylan in '65, and Penny's got a top hat on, and holding a 16 mil, and strapped over him is this big monster of a reel-to-reel. And you're gonna see some reel-to-reels on the bus and back in Kesey's barn. And they're these giant machines, is what a reel-to-reel recording device was, 100 pounds or something. So these guys, interestingly enough, just as they were sort of pioneering so many other things, painting a school bus and driving it across the country having adventures that everybody's done for now 60 years, these were the first guys to do it. And they were also sort of, at the cutting of the wave of documentary filmmaking. So this is right when documentary filmmaking was about to change forever. And here's these guys capturing their own world that was going to change the world forever. So that'll probably do it. You can buy this film for, I think it's like $13, $14, $12 on Amazon. So you can get a DVD of this thing, and there's great extras and a commentary version. And I've got some books here if you want, how the Beats begat the Pranksters. That's all about all this psychedelic stuff. And that's a picture of Ken Kesey and Allen Ginsberg with their fingers entwined. Really symbolic of how these two movements blended together. So, there we go. All right.
Yeah.
You're gonna love this. It's freaking great. Watch for the editing. It's absolutely masterful. Great graphics and lots of George Walker. Okay. Let's hit it. Who's the...
Yeah, Brian.